a pleasure to be here once again to speak to you all under different circumstances, but it is good to see those of your faces that are here, those of you that I can see. We live in a different time, a time none of us have seen before, but a time as leaders we are working to try to figure out how to operate in. I'm not going to tell you anything really today that you don't already know. I'm just going to try to encourage you a little bit. And I've given this talk before about how we prepare, and those of you that have been around may have heard some of it. Talk about how to have successful relations with your legislators and how to prepare for the session. And I always say, I don't know why Sonny asked me to do this, because I was the worst president in the history of this association in getting legislation passed, but I think I'm the only one that says, yeah, I'll go do it. But I only passed 2 bills, which is a record for the least amount of legislation passed in a year when I was president back in 2000. But we did a few other things, including handle jail overcrowding, which we may get the opportunity to do again. And there's some things, general things, that even with COVID continue to be facts, if you will, such as, all of us continue to think there are things we can do that we can't do without the legislature. We all think that we can do things as commissioners without having successful relations sometimes, which we can't do. We are bodies of the state. Sometimes we forget that. We always think in our minds that we have to keep in our minds the fact that to get things done, not only at the state level, but at the local level, we've got to have our legislative delegation. It's important that you get elected legislators who you can work with. And whenever sessions or elections like we just had, and in 2 years, it's important that you think about that. I know you have to worry about yourselves, but you need to think about electing legislative people that you can work with and have your interest, not your individual, but your county's interest in mind. And I would encourage you, we had some conversation in the board meeting today, I would encourage you not to let party affiliation get involved in it. We're all in this together. We're all Alabamians, and we need to be all for the good of the citizens of this state. Having said that, okay, what am I pushing the side? There we go. Having said that, this year is a little different. No, this year is a lot different. We've had to rethink everything we do, both from the professional level to the personal level to the providing of services level, everything that we do. And that's going to include whatever we do with the Alabama legislature. As a county commissioner, you can't govern locally, and we can't be successful as an association without the ability to influence the Alabama legislature. I hope you don't think you've been elected to city government and you can do what you want, because you haven't. You're a county commissioner, and you have to depend on the Alabama legislature whether you like them or not. So you better figure out how to get along with them if you plan to do anything in your position. You all are on the legislative committee, so you know that, I hope. The path to success that we're going to hear about the rest of this session, the rest of this meeting, and your path at the local level depends on that relationship with the legislature, and that doesn't change because of this little weird looking thing. Doesn't change. What changes is how you get there. What changes is you walking up to your legislature and putting your arm around his or her neck, more hers than before, and having conversations that way. So we've got to figure out how to do that. How many of your county commissions have directly been impacted by COVID? Raise your hand. Up high, David. That's 70% of you. I've got a commissioner at home right now that is positive. I had it back in June when we thought it was so bad. It is worse now, today, as we stand here. Sonny and I were just talking about this, than it was back in June when it was so bad. And we heard all this, oh, after the election it's going away. Oh, this is all made up by the media. Bull crap. This is serious stuff we're dealing with. Serious stuff. I just read on AL.com a minute ago, they said the vaccine is going to be available in Alabama for general distribution in June. Best of my recollection, that is after this session, right, Sonny? So, I don't know where he went, after the legislative session. So that means we've got to deal with this general ongoing thing with COVID till at least that time frame. Everybody's been saying, oh, the vaccine will be ready right after the first of the year. June, they're saying, for general distribution. Now, you heard Senator Reid say for medical and folks like that, they'll make it available soon, but we've got to deal with this problem. You even heard Senator Reid talk about access to the legislature and how they were going to change that. So we've got to be prepared to deal with that. So this statement right here, I think, takes on more meaning than ever before for us, because you're elected, and whether you want to be or not, you're a leader. And we all, right now, have to become the leaders we were elected to be. Because it's in times like this, when things are difficult, that we show our leadership ability. You have to be able to do your job. You can't just advocate your position and say, oh, well, COVID's here, let's don't worry about it until it's gone. You have to understand that we're living through unprecedented times, and a lot of your decisions as it deals with this little thing are not going to be popular. But in my opinion, you have to err on the side of the safety of your citizens. As I said, this stuff is serious. I'm so tired of hearing people say, oh, the media is making this up. It's all media. It's all going away with, it's all made up. I know people that have died. I have commissioners that are sick. You have friends that are sick. It is as real as anything I've ever seen. And I hope you all as leaders take it that way and we treat it that way. Leadership, that's what we've got to provide. So how do we do that? With that background, how do we provide and how do we govern? Well, I think there are, whether it's a normal time or not, there are two things that really contribute to good relations with your legislative delegation. And they're cliche and you're going to know them, but I'm going to run through them anyway because Sonny said I had to take 30 minutes. So, one is communication. Now, before, that's easy. You just talk to them and communicate with them and those kind of things. And this is the way we do it, right? No. This is the way it sometimes ends up being if you don't like your legislators. But it's important that you communicate with them. Now, there's still a lot of ways of communication that are okay during the COVID crisis. It's important that you communicate with them, but it's also important that you develop a two-way communication, that you establish a relationship with them so that your legislators feel comfortable calling you and asking you about an issue. We have had that in the past with ours, and historically we've had good relations. We've had some ups and downs in the last few years, but by the way, I've got two commissioners here, and one serves on the legislative committee and the other one on the board, and thank you all for being here. And one of my other commissioners served on the minority steering committee. So we really believe in this association, and I know all of you do, but I hope all of your commissions do too, because it's important. Communication back and forth is important, and that's not just when they're in Montgomery, that's when they're back at home as normal people, or some of them act normal. That's important to develop that communication. You can still talk on the phone to them. You can still do other things that COVID hasn't impacted, very few things like that. You need to know their position on the issues that you have and let them know yours. You need to keep them updated on local programs and particularly on ACCA programs. The worst thing that happens to our staff is when they're trying to promote something and a legislator will say to them, well, I haven't heard that from my county commission. I haven't heard from my county commission on an issue. It's hard for them to do their job when we don't do our job. So be sure you do that and communicate. Now you have to do some new things this time though, because you can't do put your arm around them and tell them in their ear what they need to do. And, you know, we've all got new terms like podcasts and you know, you've got to figure out alternatives and social distance, and do electronic communication. And Abby's going to talk this afternoon, I think, about virtual communication for the association stuff that we need to pay attention to, but that works for us at the local level too. Because we're not doing this person-to-person thing, I think it's extremely important this year particularly that we follow up on communication. You know, you can send somebody an email and in your mind you've delivered the message, but I assure you emails are getting less and less effective. People are using texts and other types of communication, so you've got to follow up on what you're doing. If you want to get the message across to them, you better make sure they got it, not just assume they got it if you send them an email. And use our association. I mean, yeah, they're going to be busy as they can be, but they know how to get the message to legislators. If you have trouble figuring out how to get the message to your legislator, talk to our staff. They'll be glad to help you get the word out there. You've all seen this. You know, we used to have a meeting every year with our legislative delegation. We even expanded it at one point to include, I think, four counties in our region, because we really operate as a region down there in southeast Alabama. And I don't know, for some reason we quit doing that, but it's going to be hard to do that this year. But you can certainly set up a Zoom meeting with them or other types of meetings. So be thinking about that, and other tools, not just Zoom, but there are plenty of other tools out there that allow you to get the word out, because it's, as I said, it's really important that they understand where you are. David, you let me know when I get close to my time so you can go do your business. This is a good example of what not to do. We were trying to put, this is old, but I always put this up there because it's important that you don't do this. We were back in, I don't remember what year this is, it probably says up there, but we were trying to pass a piece of legislation, a local bill. And this article appears in the paper one morning. Obviously, we had not done a good job in communicating with our representative. You never want this to happen. Houston County set a good example for me to use in this speech every time about what you don't want to do. You got to let the folks know, and you just got to figure out right now the best way for them to know, and be sure something like this doesn't happen. Now, nobody reads the paper anymore, but still, you don't need this to come out there and happen. Miscommunication can absolutely kill any opportunity you have to govern. The second thing that's important, other than communication, is support. And I don't mean political support or fiscal. I mean public support to them, and giving your legislators the opportunity to take credit for things. And we've got a lot of road money going around, and you know, that COVID hadn't impacted that. We've got road work going on everywhere. I think we've been very fortunate to have the road money and the road work we've got going on all across this state and counties. And a lot of that gives you opportunity to involve your legislative delegation in what's going on. Don't let that slide. Again, You need to build that relationship with them so you can do your job whether you like them or not. Don't let that get in the way. You know, post their pictures on Facebook or wherever. And yeah, I said Spacebook. I told Judge Money I called it Spacebook because I think most of the people on there are from outer space, but we have to use it. It's a tool. So it and other social media sites. You know, again, don't let that article you saw ever happen. Public agreement is important, that y'all are on the same page. Keep them informed. Don't let them look like they don't know what you're talking about, and certainly you don't need to be caught off guard by something they're doing. You need to be aware of what this association is doing, and there was a good article, if y'all hadn't seen this article in this month's magazine. Y'all read the AC? I'm not going to ask you that. That'd be a bad thing to ask, wouldn't it? It might hurt somebody's feeling in the back, but we all read the ACCA magazine when it comes out. Is that a better way to say it, David? This article was in there this month, and it talks about ways to handle communication and how to keep your legislators informed. And you need, as a leader and as part of this group, and of course you're the ones that put this together as a legislative committee, but we all need to keep our legislative delegation aware of what our goals are that come out of this meeting. You all, each representing your county, should probably try to bring up periodically at your commission meeting, as part of the meeting, you know, during the session, what's going on with the ACC legislation, and talk about it. That way, unless you're like us and the media never comes to your meeting anymore, that way the media has the opportunity to bring something up that then shows up in the media that your legislators see, and they know that's important to you. Because the media should come to your meeting. They don't come to our meeting anymore because we don't let anybody come into our meetings. But that gives you an opportunity if you as the legislative committee have a spot. If your chairman gives you a spot on the commission meeting to talk about the legislative program and the things the ACCA is doing, it gives you an opportunity to get that out there. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is don't forget your local legislation. I mean, our association program is extremely important, but don't forget local legislation. It's a different process that you've got to keep your eyes on. Our staff can't monitor your local legislation for you. You know, there's a process that definitely involves your local folks, so you've got to communicate with them. You've got to talk to them about it in advance. You've got to get buy-in from them. They can kill any piece of local legislation they want. You know, if I was king of Alabama, I'd have it where if a county commission passed it, then the legislators had to pass it. I'm not king yet. Probably won't ever be, so that's not going to happen. Be aware of the timing. There is timing involved, the number of weeks that have to run for local legislation. Y'all all know that, but I'm just saying, be aware of your local legislation. Patience is very important in local legislation. Sometimes it takes years to get what you want to get passed, and monitor it and keep them aware. So, New World communication. New World because of COVID. Social distance meetings, your masks, your guidelines, sanitization, all the things you do that you're doing at the courthouse. Virtual gatherings using Zoom and all those other things we talked about, that's a possibility instead of having those joint meetings or in-person meetings like we talked about. Electronic correspondence, the most important thing there is the follow-up. Don't assume that they got what you sent them. Personal visits and calls are still important. You just got to be careful with those. And some people are more cognizant of that distancing than others. And I put all commissioners here, all commissioners individually, because I think it's important that your entire commission get involved in the process. not just you as chairman or you as the legislative committee individual, that all your commissioners get involved. Community meetings when appropriate. Our chamber used to have a legislative committee meeting during the session every 2 or 3 weeks. They're not doing that now, but they are talking about virtual stuff. So if that's going on, be sure your legislators know about it and are part of it, or it doesn't have to be the chamber, but anybody else that gives you the opportunity to interface with them. And then, of course, as I said, communicate, communicate, and communicate. Okay, so that's all I've got for that. Any questions about any of that or anything else, including the football game?